And what happened is I had this spiritual experience that God was saying, I'm not done with you. You have work to do, my son. The pain you have to walk through will build you stronger.
Well, hello, friends of Bill W. and other friends. You have landed on Sober Speak. My name is John M. I am an alcoholic, and we are glad you are all here, especially newcomers. Newcomers, that is, both to recovery as a whole and newcomers to this podcast. Sober Speak is a podcast about recovery centered around the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. My job here on Sober Speak is simple. My job is to provide a platform to the amazing stories of recovery all around us. Consider Sober Speak, if you will, your meeting between meetings. Please remember, we do not speak for AA or any 12-step community. We represent only ourselves. We are here to share our experience, strength, and hope with those who wish to come along for the ride. Take what you want and leave the rest at the curb for the trash man to pick up. From Studio AA deep in the heart of Texas, welcome to episode number 258, and that was the voice of my friend Brian P. that you heard at the beginning of this episode, and you are going to hear so much more from him in uno momento. But first things first, this here episode is being brought to you by Laura and Tanya. What, may you ask, did Laura and Tanya do? Well, they went to our website, www.soberspeak.com. They clicked on the little yellow donate tab and they made a contribution. So thank you so much, Laura and Tanya, for your contribution. This episode is coming right out to Ewan's. What do I want to talk about? Well, I'm sure there's some people saying, don't talk about anything, just get to the speaker. But you know what? It's my podcast and I'll do what I want to. So anyway, what happened? Oh, this has been a very, a very cool day for me in so many ways. And I want to tell you this. So over the past, I'd say 3 weeks or so, I've been pumping out the episodes and I've been doing my thing and I've been living life and such. But I want to let you know that quite honestly, I went through a really kind of down time, some depression and anxiety, rethinking where I was in life, and and there have been some things that have happened, but maybe it's just that it just happens, right? It just ebbs and flows in life. And, but I'm feeling much, much better today. All I know is when I get in those little funks that I should just keep moving along, staying with the process. And when I say staying with the process, for me, that means continuing to do prayer and meditation, talking to my sponsor, going to meetings, trying to help somebody every once in a while in some form or fashion, doing service work, and doing inventories as well, right? Thinking about where am I selfish, dishonest, resentful, and afraid, and doing all those things. So that's what had been going on with me over the past few weeks. But I would tell you today was very interesting because my son, my beloved son, passed his driver's test. Yes, he is an actual driver now. I mean, I don't know. We'd been practicing with him a lot, but he actually went over there, took the test today, and he was proud. We were proud of him. My precious daughter is still recovering from some ankle surgery that she got, and it must have been about 3 weeks ago now or so. But I mean, they do some major damage when they go in there to do that ankle surgery. I say damage. You know what I mean? They cut you open and and then you got to heal up and go through the entire recovery process. She still has not been able to put on any weight on it. She gets around on a little scooter. I took her to the mall the other day, but it was, she just couldn't stay there very long. And it's just been kind of a much tougher recovery than we anticipated. But I'm sure it will be over soon enough. Just while you're going through, it can be a little bit challenging, especially for her. But me as her dad, watching her go through it is just tough. And my wife is finally starting to get on the other side of the major car wreck that she had back in July, and I'm glad to see that she's doing so much better. And it's just cool to watch her getting better day by day now. And I'm sure she's going to be fully recovered eventually, but it just took much longer than we anticipated. And I was honored to do a third step with a sponsee earlier today here at the house. And that always lifts my spirits as well. That's about it. So anyway, on to Mr. Brian P. We recorded this live at the Tri-Cities event. It's a speaker meeting here we have in North Texas. And I don't really know where to start with this one in terms of an introduction. Let me just say this. You need to listen to this one all the way through. Brian addresses a few things. Number one, his, I guess what you would call bank robbing skills. Bank robbing skills. I don't think I've ever put those three words together in the past. A very, very traumatic experience that he had in prison. You'll want to hear that. He talks about his admiration for the program of Al-Anon. He also uses a term in here. I'd never heard it before. At least I don't remember hearing it. Maybe I have at some point, but in fact, it could have been on one of the other episodes. Brian has been on the podcast in the past, but he uses a term called strategy drinking. And I like that. He talks about his relationship with his ex-wife and his kids, the subject of compassion, and much, much more. Remember, you just got to listen to this one all the way through. Please enjoy Brian P. And we will have plenty listener feedback at the end of this episode. Enjoy.
So tonight our speaker is Brian P. from Smoking Gun Big Book Study Group. Let's give him a round of applause. Welcome.
I had him put this podium down here and so I could look taller. I don't know if you saw the first podium, but I couldn't even see over it. So, well, hey everybody. I'm Brian. I'm an alcoholic. By the grace of loving God, good sponsorship, and 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, I've been sober since March 6th of 1993. It was, 29 years. And here's the thing: if you're new or whatever. I didn't plan on getting sober that day. Just want to let you know. I never planned on getting sober. I got sentenced to AA by my parole officer. But the day that I got sober, I'd been sober a year and 2 weeks previously, and I was on a 3-month run. And my road dog, you have a road dog when you come in, you're running with him. And my road dog was Max. And he was a Buddhist surfer from California, a heroin addict. And me and him just jived because, he'd been in prison. I'd been in prison. We had connection. And I was trying to act like I wasn't in relapse, but clearly I was. And he pulled me up on a Friday night and asked me how long I've been sober. And I said, dude, you're at my 1-year anniversary 3 months ago. And he said, no, really, how long have you been sober? Like a day, 2 days, maybe not even. And I said, man, I don't need this. And I started to walk around, and angry Buddhists are really scary. And so he kind of shifted and got in front of me, and he just said something. He said, I love you too much to watch you die. And on that day, I had what I call the double surrender, which I think there's many surrenders after that, but I think the two primary surrenders are I surrendered to the bottle and I surrendered my will on that day. And I was 30 years old. I had just spent 7 years in prison. Of course, I'd been out for about a year and a half. And I broke down crying. I couldn't, and I hadn't cried and shed a tear since I was 10 years old. My brother molested me back then, and I was just shut off, and I was I was not a tough guy because, I'm 5'1", but I was hard. I was very hard. And, he's 6 months later, he started using, he's never been sober since. And I've been sober ever since. And it hurts me, but it's like this idea that I'm sober by the grace of God. And I think everybody, like anybody comes to AA, anybody comes around, grace is everywhere, but I think grace only works if you accept it. And that's what I did. And part of me accepting grace was, I don't have any more answers. I'll do anything I'm asked. And I need help. And that's not my MO my whole life. And I'm going to let this, look, I don't know where this is going. I don't ever say this same talk ever twice, because John and I just prayed and God's in charge. So anything that you like or is important to you, just know God gave that. And if you think this talk sucks and you're talking about me in the bathroom or in the parking lot, just know you're judging God, and we don't do that in AA. So my home group is the Smoking Gun Big Book Step Study. It's the most ridiculous name. I didn't pick it. I wanted the Stove Touchers was mine. I wanted to be Stove Touchers. The three of us who started it was my now ex-wife and my buddy Jeff, and I let him pick it. And we were down in Bishop Arts area at the time. And now we're down on Addison. So we're up here Thursday nights at 7. We just changed. And I love that group. We even have a cowboy hat signed by this drunk named Bubba B from Austin, and he signed it. So there's not a Texan in that room. For us, we started it. We're outsiders. So I got sober on March 6th, 93. How I got sober, what I was like, and how I found out I was alcoholic, because my experience has been, I grew up in Stockton, California. Now, anyone from California? Okay, anyone know Stockton? Yeah, that's a great place to be from. It was a violent place back then, and it's a violent place now. And I grew up in a home where my parents were beer can collectors. It was like their hobby to collect beer cans, old beer cans, and like people trade baseball cards. They would go to these conventions, and so I'd been around alcohol my whole life, and not in the bad part of it, but the excitement of it. And started drinking like normal people drink, and there's nothing in my early stage that would identify me as alcoholic. I would do this at keg parties, I never left 5-10 feet from a keg. I always had pitchers in my trunk of my car when it got low so I could fill it up. So maybe I call that strategy drinking, but, I think that could be called alcoholism. My mom said, if you're going to drink, just stay in your car. But it was after high school. I graduated in 1980. Yeah, I know, I'm 60, I look 40, I get it. But from 18 to 21 was this thing of, I moved out when I graduated from high school. Moved out, got in a room with a bunch of friends, and I just was independent and became a daily drinker. And I didn't think I was an alcoholic. I didn't drink in the morning. My buddy did. I thought that was a problem. If I get like him, I had another friend who got violent, and I thought, well, if I get like Norman, maybe. Look, first off, I'm not fighting anybody. I'm trying to avoid fights. And second off, I did other things, outside issues in the morning before I went to work. I didn't have to drink. I could not see it, but I can tell you, I can describe alcoholism and me and how it worked. Around 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I haven't drinking all day, and I'm at that 2 hours before, I'm grumpy, I'm irritable, I'm restless, I'm discontent, I'm annoyed. Everybody annoys me. They're doing their job wrong. And then like 30 minutes before I get off, I start thinking about going to the bar, and I start thinking about the liquor store, and I get relief even before I drink. I start to feel better. And I drive to the liquor store, I'm tapping my feet, I'm happy, and I go to the liquor store. I love drinking. I love everything about drinking. I love I just love the taste of it. I love bars the next day. That's how sick I am. I am a guy who just loved it all. But I hid it behind these outside issues. It was early 80s, and I became a drug dealer. And, and when you're using the substance that you're dealing, that's a bad business model, just for anyone out there, if you're going to. And I was notorious for telling my dealers, like, hey, I know I owed you 2, here's 16, and I'll get caught up. And then I just went around for about a year and a half until it got to a place of the end. where everybody was like done with me. And I robbed drug dealers, which is stupid because they knew who I was, they just like, Burkox, we know it's you. You're like, I'm 5'1". I mean, I have this like, and I would do things like, oh, Levato, man, you don't know nothing, man. And it was crazy. And this is the end. That's a Doors song. This is the end. And so I was broke, and I had a buddy running with me. We worked on a crew of painters, and I had no more money, and nobody was gonna help me. And I said, I got a plan. And he said, what's your plan? He said, I'll follow your plan. He'll follow me anywhere, right? This guy, and he was like an engineer student. I have no idea why he followed my plan. And I said, we go rob this Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I had a fiance whose dad owned a gun shop. He said, look, we can take him out. I got ski masks. We got rope. This will be a big deal. And we drove down there, AC/DC, Back in Black. We're like, we're going to take this place out. And I roll in, and they say, hi, welcome to Kentucky Fried Chicken. And I go into the bathroom, and I'm shaking, and he goes, what's up? I said, this is crazy, dude. We can't do this. I said, no, I know. This is like, what are we doing? So he goes, what are we going to do? And I said, well, I don't know, let's eat. So I have a nickname. I have a couple nicknames. One of them is 3-piece, because I had a 3-piece original recipe, which is the only one. And the other one is Shorty P. I got that when I was in prison, and went out to kill myself that night. And my glass is always half full, even when I don't have a glass. So I'm not a guy who like is deep and dark. I'm not that type of guy. I'm gregarious. I'm outgoing. But it was really hopeless at 21. And I took I cut off a piece of hose and took my roommate's car out into the desert pretty deep. And I started pumping fumes. And I'll tell you what, the only reason that I didn't end that was because I was writing a letter to my mom. I wrote a letter to my friend, said, hey, I'm sorry I killed myself in your car. But then I started writing a letter to my mom. And when I was the youngest of 4, my brother Chucky died of leukemia. He was 7. I was 5. And though I couldn't comprehend it at that age, growing up, knowing that my parents buried a 7-year-old, and I watched what it did to my mom. I watched on the anniversary of his death and his birthday, my mom would go on 3-day benders. I watched how much that destroyed her, and I knew it was probably the only selfless thought I'd had in a long time, which is it would kill my mom. And I still didn't know how I was going to get out of this pickle. So, it's interesting in the big book. It talks about intuitive thought in step 11. So I was driving on the road. I didn't kill myself. I walked around. I realized my only problem is lack of funds is my dilemma. So I need some funds, and I'm driving on the road, and I had an intuitive thought. An intuitive thought was, you should rob that bank. And so I followed that intuitive thought, and clearly it wasn't from God, it was from self, and I went in and I robbed that bank. I wasn't a good bank robber. I got $50 my first bank robbery. And I got 50 because I asked for it. I wrote a note like, I have a gun, I'll kill you, give me $50. And I have no idea why you would do that. And I remember standing in line. I was a really polite bank robber, I was waited my turn, handed her the note. She looked down, gave me a $50 bill, and I ran, and I saw my note. And so I went to the store, got some beer, got settled in, and then I drove across town and robbed another bank. I didn't get 50. I asked for way more. An interesting thing is the FBI at that bank was doing their bank robbery seminar teaching thing, and they got the call for the first one. They packed up and left, and then I went to that bank and robbed it. I had no idea. They thought I was a mastermind until they saw that I asked for $50, and they're like, he's not a mastermind. And so I just continued on. I just continued doing what I was doing. 6 months later, asked my boss, hey, can I take the van? I got to go cash a check, and he gives it to me, and I drive into town, rob another bank. And I'm thinking, why isn't everybody doing this? They just give you the money. Then what happened is I came out in the news, 6 o'clock news, newspaper. They didn't know my name, but they were looking for me, 8-8 crime, $5,000 reward. And my roommates had cut it out of the paper that day and put it on the refrigerator. And when I came back, it was there, and that's me. And because I live with a bunch of stoners, I brought it out to them. I said, what's this? And they look at me, they go, oh man, dude, there's some dude running around town robbing banks, looks just like you. And that only reflects not how stoned they were, but how out of character it was, okay? And 2 weeks later, I got arrested, got bailed out. My parents did what they do. They bailed me out, got me a lawyer. Lawyer said, you're going to prison for 10 years. I robbed another bank. I thought that was a good idea because, there's not a lot of 5-for-1 bank robbers on bail, and I thought I would get away with it. But that's just drama stuff. And that's why I hid my alcoholism behind that, because that's drama. Alcoholism was subtle. The progression was subtle. And I did all my time, and I did 6 years, got out. It's 20 years sober before I told anybody I was raped in prison. My mom had a story because I went from a medium security to max, and I was in solitary for 9 months. They thought this guy may die because I had to. My cellie wanted to take me to the hospital, and the infirmary, and I wouldn't go because I didn't want to get checked into protective custody. And I was mad as a rattlesnake, but I was busted up pretty bad. And he said, well, then you got to take care of us. And next day, and I'm not a violent guy. I have a lot of compassion, and I almost killed a man. And I remember when I was on the floor and him and his 3 buddies did what they did. I remember he cut me. I have a scar right here. And I remember him leaning in and cutting me and saying, I'll see you tomorrow, punk. And I've never been as angry as I've been, and as hard as I've been, and as red. I would have killed that man if my cellie did not pull me off him. And I tried to get out of it, and I was covered in blood, and they just pulled me, and I went to Terre Haute, Indiana, max security prison. I went from the frying pan to the fire, and spent 9 months in solitary, and then got out and did my rest of my time, no problems. And I won't get into that detail, but I got out, and I had a condition, and this is when I found out I had alcoholism. What time is it, John? Okay, so I got a half hour? Okay. So what happened is I got out. I did 6 years basically on a 6-year sentence. I had 5 years probation. One of the conditions that my professor put me on when I went on the probation was that I needed to go to this IOP, and I couldn't drink alcohol for 90 days. And I said to him, well, I don't have an alcohol problem. So, well, what, And he goes, oh, well, it's part of the program. It's an IOP. And since you don't have an alcohol problem, 90 days should be no problem. And that kind of logic makes me angry, but you can't argue it. And I went to my 10-year high school reunion. And, this is basically what you're hearing about is the guy who makes a lot of poor decisions. Like, I don't know why I thought, hey, we should go to my 10-year high school reunion because I'm a winner. I've been in prison 7 years. I was all over the news. Like, it just didn't make any sense. But my buddy said, let's go. And I went, and I was 30 days sober, no AA. I wasn't going to meetings. I was signing. I wasn't going in, I was just signing them. And 30 days without a drink or anything, no spiritual solution. And I'm just tight. And I'm getting tighter, and I'm getting angrier, and I'm just ready to explode. And I walk in, and I can't take it. And I end up in the bar that night. And one drink led to 2, led to 4, led to 8, led to 10. And then I started drinking daily. And then I started doing outside substances. And then, a couple months later, calls me, says, got 3 dirty urines. And I said, what do you want me to do? He said, well, come by tomorrow. We'll talk about it, which is code for you're going back to prison. So I just went on the run. And this is when it changed. My parents loved me so much. I'm so blessed, My dad, for the first 6 years in prison, sent me $20 money orders from my commissary every week. Every week. With a little note. I love you, son. Every week. And I was judging him, like, why don't you send me 80 or 100 in my mind? Like, why are you trying to control my ice cream intake or whatever? What I learned when I was 10 years sober, when we were playing golf and talking, and I paid them back. Part of my amends to them was paying all that money back, every $20. Even though they didn't want it, they agreed to take it. And my last check to him, and we were talking, he said, you know why I sent you $20 a week instead of 80 or 100 a month? And I said, no, I really thought you were just trying to control me. And he said, no, son. He said, I love you so much. He said, I just knew that you needed to get something every week from someone that loved you. My dad fought in the Korean War. Never struck me. Maybe one time when I was a kid spanked me. My dad loved me, and he was a kind man. And he was a good man. And I put my family through hell. And what happened is, I go back on this violation. You get 16 months. They call me for mail call, and I think I'm getting my $20 money order, which I deserved, clearly. And I got a note from my parents which says, we're done supporting you financially. And basically, are there any Al-Anons in the room? Raise your hand if there's Al-Anons. Okay. So Al-Anon saved my life. Right, that's a trick, because if you believe that, because Al-Anon doesn't save lives. But they allowed my mom the space to do what she had to do, which is write me a letter saying, I can no longer, you're 28 years old. You'll be 29 when you get out. You are on your own. We are not going to support you anymore. No more financial support. And I thank God that an Al-Anon lady on my mom's bowling team pulled her aside and said, you're killing your son. And let me tell you, my mom buried Chucky when he was 7. Now, I didn't know what I was like until I became a father. When I held my daughter, Quincy Blue is her name, when I held her, when she came out, it was a C-section, and the doctor said, you have a beautiful daughter, and I cried and I wept, and when I held her, I knew unconditional love. I knew instantly how hard that must have been on my mom. And when I made amends to my mom, when I asked Mom, is there anything you want to say? And my mom said, yeah, I'm going to tell you something. She was it was easier to bury Chucky than write you that letter. It was easier to bury a 7-year-old son than to write me a letter saying she can't support me. And that pierced my heart. And she explained it. She said, when Chucky got cancer, we gave him to the doctor, said, fix our baby with you. I had a choice. And the only reason you got it is because Monday through Friday, I would leave it in the mailbox 5 minutes, pull it out. The only reason is your dad on Friday put his hand on my shoulder and said, let him go. I'm the baby. I'm like the youngest. My mom's whole life was to protect me. And I forced her to have to step away from me. That's how selfish I am. I still today regret that I had to do that. And I know they say we don't regret the past, but I'm telling you right now, that is a regret I have because I never wanted to be that son. And I did that year. I got out, homeless shelter, could not drink the first time I was out. My professor came to talk. I thought he was going to throw me back. He sat me down. He broke his anonymity. He said, I've been sober 6 months. You're not going back. I'm not going to tell the parole board. You could go back for 8 months. You've done 7 years. What's that going to cause? Here's your choice. You go to a meeting every day for the rest of the time you're here, or you go back to prison. What do you want to do? Well, it's not a hard choice when you're 29, you've been in prison for a long time. Like, there's women at AA meetings. So I'm like, yeah, I'll try AA. Didn't think I was an alcoholic, and I went to the meetings. I took the bus to the meeting. My very first AA meeting, 29 years old. There's some magic in the halls. And for the men who came up to me and welcomed me, and I was feral. Feral. I had Axl Rose bandana, feathered hair. This is like 1992 at the time. I had a walk. It was a prison walk. I had I pulled a bandana all the way down. I used to button my shirt and then let it down. Like, I always wanted to be a vato, I'm going to be a Chicano. I always wanted that. They were like because I grew up in Stockton and then I moved to Tucson, and I just like, those are my people. And, I'm as white as you can get, but, you know what? I was everybody I ever met when I came to AA. I know who I was. I was anybody I needed to be in your circle. That's who I'd be. And so I started going to AA, and I started believing that now that I don't want to drink, I won't drink. And now that there's this fellowship, I fell in love with the fellowship, and I hung out with the guys that were basically going to the dog track, and they're doing all the things they used to do, but they were sober as long as the guys that were doing big book stuff and talking about making amends and praying, which is like, well, that's way too serious. And a year and 2 weeks, I drank. Then I got sober, and that day, 2 days later, March 8th, I picked a guy, his name was Kenny. He was like Cowboy Kenny, and I've seen him in the meetings, and I liked him, but I didn't want to do what he did, but I knew everybody was getting sober, and I asked him if he'd sponsor me, and he said, I'd love to sponsor you. It'd be an honor. And he gave me his big book, and he came out to this treatment center I was at, because I used to work there, and then I had to be a patient there, another story. And he took me through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I'm telling you right now, he did it line by line, and exactly as it says, and I had what is called a spiritual experience, a spiritual awakening. My whole personality changed. Everything, I shifted. I was an atheist, and I became a guy who believed in God. I walked in an atheist, and I had a belief system after that there's a truly loving God. John, you can tell me what time? 8:03? Oh, dude, we're going to have fun. So there's two things about me. One, I talk fast, and I walk fast because all my friends were big. I always had big friends. I think when you're my size, you'd have big friends. And so walking in the mall in the days, I've never stopped doing that. So I'll try to slow down my talk, but not too slow. But I'm telling you right now, the process of recovery that's outlined in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous, and I don't care what other people do. I really don't. I don't judge what other people do. Now, I have, but I don't. 29 years sober, I'm wiser. It's none of my business how you do AA. You do AA the way you do AA. It's none of my business. I don't want to play God in that. If you ask me to sponsor you, I'm going to take you to the 12 steps. I'm going to introduce you to Third Legacy, service work. I'm going to introduce you to the whole triangle, because GSR, DCM, area corrections. I was doing all that. And I got awakened, and I was on fire. And I met the girl in treatment who became my wife. We were in Tucson, and I don't tell this story very much, but the treatment center I worked at, I didn't use, and the guy said, you can be a patient for 90 days and then come back. I worked in the barn. They raced quarter horses. They trained them, and he offered me a job because I guess I'm small enough to be a jockey. And that's when I went to the steps, and about 2 months into it, I realized now my ex-wife, but my girlfriend at the time, she was there 9 months already. So she kind of really 13-stepped me. I was pretty much a victim of her. And so, should I raise this? Okay, I feel like I'm hunching over. So what happened is I made a decision, I can't work for this guy. He said, work 90 days and you can work back at the barn. But I saw what he was doing was unethical. And I told my sponsor, and I said, I feel obligated because he gave me this opportunity. He says, you're only obligated to God. You're not obligated to him. And I borrowed a vehicle, which is called code for stole it, and drove into town. And me and my girlfriend were talking about, she wanted to go back to Maine. I was going to go into Tucson. And she didn't talk about this a lot. But I went into town to this halfway house, IOP, and I asked this guy, hey, I'm leaving Eagle Crest. Can I come? I don't have any money, but can I stay here and I'll work for you? And he said, absolutely. And I said, well, I have a girlfriend. He said, bring her. I said, okay. Now, my girlfriend at the time, she's debating, do I go to Tucson? Do I go to Maine? She's in with a ferry up at the ranch. I'm driving back to get this car back because I don't want to get reported stolen. She hits her knees in the stall and asks God, I need a sign. It's got to be crystal clear. What should I do? Should I go with Brian into Tucson or should I go back to Maine? And I drive up 20 minutes later after that prayer, and I walk in. I said, hey, Chloe, I have a place for us. She knew the place. I said, Kimmy's coming to pick us up. Free room and board. I work there. It's safe. If you want to leave, we got to leave in 30 minutes. And she left. And we were married 26 years until I destroyed that marriage. My soulmate, she's going to speak at Citywide. You should go hear her. She's an amazing woman. The last 3 years have been really hard. And I get asked a lot to speak around the country, and that's not bragging. It's just because I have a crazy story, and I have a host of friends around the country who say they love me and I'm worthwhile. And I had 2 years of sitting in my apartment thinking I should just die. So we were living in this halfway house, and we moved to Maine, and we start getting busy in AA. I'm a high school graduate, barely C-level, got a job at a marketing firm. With convicted felon. I just told the guy, basically, I'm here to replace your two best sales reps. And he thought that was brazen. He said, I'll give you 6 months. And I worked for that man for 13 years. And you could take all the other reps and double. I doubled what they sold in a year because a guy gave me an opportunity. And I told him, I will be here early. I will be here late. And that's what I did. My dad gave me that gift and worked way above my education. And I got busy doing work in my service work, GSR, home group, DCM, but of all the things that have touched my spirit, because there's a thing, if you really want to know God, get to know his kids. Because that's where God lives, right? He lives in us, and he really lives in kids. They're pure, and he lives with our fellows. And a guy told me that. You want to know God, Brian? Get to know his kids. I started going into a maximum security prison in Maine. I ended up in a location in Maine where there was 6 penal institutions within 20 minutes. I didn't plan it. That's where I ended up. And I started going in, and I didn't like what was happening with this one in the group, and I called this guy Tom I, and if you've ever haven't heard Tom I, you should get one of his tapes. He's amazing. And I called Tom, and I said, hey, they're not, he said, why don't you do this? Why don't you get another day and take them in through the 12 steps so they have a spiritual awakening before they leave? And I thought that was ridiculous, so I called a guy named Don P., who was my mentor, and Don P. said the same thing, and I thought, these guys are in cahoots. And for 15 years, I went into that prison twice a week, because I ended up doing it at the farm, and I was blessed to take them in through the 12 steps in the prison. I was blessed to hear 5th steps. I was so honored to have a room. They had a room called Brian's 5th Step. I sat knee to knee with men whose society had thrown away, and watched them cry and watched them their humanity just came out. And it's nothing that I did, okay? Trust me. It's God. And intuitive thought. One of my guys was there, and I said, what's going on? Where's John? And they said, oh, they're doing Kairos, which is I said, what's Kairos? And it's a 3-day Christian thing, and they bring all these. I said, well, that sounds like an AA conference. So I started an AA conference in that prison. Only never been happened before. An AA conference behind the walls, maximum security prison. I called all these hotshot circuit speaker guys, cash your miles in because I don't have any money, and you're so proud to be in AA, you can live in my basement and I'll feed you. And so they cashed their miles in, and there was 25 of us going into that prison for a 3-day AA conference. We did that 3 times. It was the most powerful experience I ever had. Got to see the love, and I got busy. Had a kid, my daughter was born, my son, work, and, I moved to Texas in 2011. Not planned. Okay. I was in Copenhagen, Denmark, doing a big book retreat for some men, which to me is like weird. Like they're asking me to come to Copenhagen. Like, sure, I'll come. And this owner of this treatment center in this area, I got sober with him. We got sober, and he went with me. And then something happened. At this time I had quit my marketing company, owned my marketing company, me, and had some employees. And then he got a call, and it was defeated. And he's like, I just can't keep CEOs. And I said something that I didn't think I was going to say, which is, if you want me to sell to my partner, I'll move to Texas and help you. And then I thought, what did I just say? And he said, are you serious? I said, well, if Chloe's okay with it. And then we got to Boston, and Chloe said, sure. And we moved to Texas. And I'll tell you what I love about Texas against New England. Texans are the most friendliest people. Like when I moved to Round Rock, I was like, they're the kindest. They come and bring pies, and in New England, they don't even look at you. They're like, I was told my kids weren't even Mainers because there had to be 3 generations before they got to be Mainers. It was just very cold. But Texans were, and I did that, and I started. And here's an experience I had. Don P. taught me in the 11th step. There's this vital spiritual, like 6th sense, right? It's this intuitiveness. Now, it's not the one that said, go rob the bank. It's a God-inspired intuitiveness, right? Because we only have one voice. It's not like we have a Darth Vader voice and a Yoda voice. Wouldn't that be great if we did have that? Don taught me that this intuitive thought, after we get everything cleansed out and we can hear God, you must follow the directions. And you must follow that. And I wish it was a different voice, but it's the same voice. And my dad was having these little TAs, he's struggling with like little strokes, and I'm living in Round Rock by myself because Chloe and the kids are waiting. They're finishing the school year. And in April of 2012, I came out of meditation. My dad had just come out of the hospital again, and God whispered to me. And I believe it's whispering. God never yells at me. And I believe if I have to hear the whispers, my spiritual house needs to be clean. I can't be consumed with judgment, resentment, anger. I must be clear spiritually to hear the whispers. God never yells. And he's a perfect gentleman. He will never come anywhere he's not invited. Like, I need to invite him into my life. Now, that I didn't create. I'm just saying, I heard it from him and like a friend, and I'm like, that's really good. I think I'll steal that. And, but the whisper that day was, go see your brother. Go see your dad. And I flew out. My mom said, you don't need to. And I climbed. My dad was in the bed, and my dad was dying. They were married 46 years. They divorced. They remarried 3 times. You know, when you bury a child, the statistics for divorce is really high, but they always got back together. And they were 40. My mom saw what she wanted to see. He's dehydrated, but I knew he was dying, and I climbed into bed with him. And my dad had Paul Newman blue eyes and black hair, and he was a kind spirit. And I just climbed in bed and wiped the sweat off and said, hey, Dad, it's Brian. And the last words he said to me, the very last words that my dad said to me, was, I love you, son. I'm really proud of you. And I called 911. We took him to the hospital, and what he had was bladder cancer that they'd been missing, and it was stage 4, and he was going to die within a month. And we all sat there that night, and then they asked us to leave, and as I walked out, I saw my dad's feet. And they had not been taking care of my dad. The toenails were growing almost under. He's a Korean War vet and a kind man. I was not going to let my dad die like that. I was like, that's not happening. And I was mad. And we all went down the elevator, and they, drove away, and I went back up. Because the intuitive thought was clearly like, you got to clean your dad's feet. And I walked up, and the nurse said to me, she says, what are you doing here? And I said, look, I don't want any problem, but have you seen my dad's feet? She said, I have. I said, please, if you could just give me toenail clippers and a little wash pin, I'll be quick. He cannot die like this. And she came back with 2 sets of toenail clippers and 2 sets of bins, and we sat and washed my dad's feet and clipped his toenails. And I remember talking to her about what a horrible son I'd been, how I'd been a disappointment, and how I hadn't been there for them. And I started to walk out, and the nurse grabbed me and pulled me to her and looked me right in the eye and said, I don't recognize any of the son that you just talked about. Like, you need to let go of that, because what I witnessed was incredible. And that is not who you are today. And I'm so grateful I listened to the whisper. I'm so grateful for that. I'm just going to tell you what's happened in the last 2.5 years. I get therapeutic here, but my trauma just started unwinding. It started blowing up, and it started having night terrors, and I could not invite my wife into that. Now, I'm not blaming that on my actions, but I was just like, I had to walk it alone. I'm a guy who, when my brother died at 4, when he got cancer, I was 4, and he was 6. Everything shifted in my household to him, which is the way it should have been. But as a 4-year-old, I don't know what's going on. And so I just learned this way to live, which is I don't ask for help. I don't trust people. I'll do it myself. And I compartmentalize my life, and that's my whole life has been like that. And I started 26 years sober. I started falling apart. Night terrors. The one person that I love the most in this life, the one person, I couldn't invite her into that. And then the trauma took me where the trauma took me, and I had some behaviors that I had to get honest, and I knew she would probably divorce me. And I'm going to tell you, my kids will tell you, she will tell you, we didn't raise our voice at each other in 26 years of marriage. That's not how but this is the prayer I did before I told her. Because what I learned is if I don't trust people, then I don't trust God. That's the truth. And at 26 years old, I got to say, I hadn't really trust God. I'll figure it out. And I got to this place spiritually where, okay, God, I'm going to trust you, and I'm going to tell Chloe the truth, and she's probably going to divorce, and I'm not going to blame you. All I'm going to ask you is that you walk with me, because I don't know if I can handle that. I just don't know. Just walk with me. And I moved into an apartment. the 8 years as a CEO of this treatment center, me and the owner talking and said, hey, I think it's time for, we to just, I like you. My friendship is more important, and I think it's ruined us. And I said, okay. So in 1 week, I'm out of the house. I don't have a job. I'm in an apartment. My buddy Jeff G said, it's gonna get dark for you. I'm like, nah, I'm a rock star. I can do this. It got dark. And, I didn't fight for her. I just let you gotta process yourself. And she did what she had the right to do, which is like, I just don't think I can get through it. And we filed divorce, and I have no hatred for her. I have nothing. I have nothing but love. She was an amazing mom. And I hurt her deeply, and our relationship today is way better. Trust me. And, but I want to tell you this story. I asked God to be with me. Almost a year later, I get a call from a friend who, anyway, we're in divorce papers, and he just calls and says, hey, I just want to let you know I'm dating Chloe. And it wasn't that he was a friend that made it dark for me. It was at the finality of it, that I will never be with her again. And it's real. And I wanted to make it about him, but it's not about him. They were free. In fact, when he called me, I hung up on him, and I had to call my friend Jeff in 10 Steps, said, I want to kill this guy. And then he said, how hard it must have been for him to call you? You were his grand sponsor. This guy, worshipped you. He loved you. And so I had to hang up on Jeff. I said, Jeff, I got to go. And I called a caller back, and I got to make amends for hanging up on the guy who's dating because it's right. It's none of my business. But that night at 3:30, I said, I'm done. And I say this, I've just started talking about this. It's the most selfish thought that I'm going to kill myself because the pain is too much. And I live in a 2-bedroom apartment, a two-story. I'm on the second floor, and I have a balcony, overlooks the parking lot. 3:30 in the morning, I text her. Her phones are always off. Tell the kids I love them. That I can't even believe I cannot believe that I was there. I took my bed sheets with a noose, and I went out to the balcony. And at 3:30 in the morning, there's a guy moving into apartments. Who moves into apartments at 3:30? What's going on here, And I'm like, he's 20 feet from my balcony. I'm like, what are you doing? I didn't say it, but I'm like, what, and why are you moving so slow? I got things to do. And what happened is I had this spiritual experience that God was saying, I'm not done with you. You have work to do, my son. The pain you have to walk through will build you stronger. I smoked a cigar, watched him. He was still there, moving really slow. And I went to bed, and then I got a knock on the door from 4 police because Chloe saw it, and she did a wellness check. In my amends to her, one of the things she said, I don't ever want to get a text like that again. It would kill your kids. My daughter, Quincy Blue, lives with me. She doesn't live with her mom. She lives with me. Not because she hates her mom. We have a different relationship. It's just my relationship with her. It's a 2-bedroom apartment. She could live in a bomber house, because the house is nice in Bishop Arts, but she lives with me. And part of that is because I think she protects me. And she's 20 years old. My kids are amazing. My son is Max, named after the guy who saved my life. And I'm going to tell you a story about Quincy, and then I'm going to read something. You know what's interesting? You ever go to a meeting where someone's trying to teach you about AA? Here's what it is. And Don taught me this. We're storytellers. Even the beginning of the book, the story of how many thousands of people. I do big book workshops 3-day all over the place. I never do real rigid, like I'm trying to teach. It's about experience. It's about the God flowing through you. It's the fact that a guy like me, a broken piece of a man, as feral as I was, as bad as I was, can walk through this process called the 12 steps and become someone different. Because that's all what a spiritual awakening is. It's a personality change. Old ideas, old motives, everything shifts. The guy I was 29 years ago will drink again. And if he drinks again, I can tell you right now, you'll see me on the news. You'll just see me on the news. When my daughter was 7, her and I used to go skiing all the time. My son was too young at the time, and all these guys from the prison would come over. We'd do this we had a 15-acre horse farm in Maine, and we'd do this paintball, this mobile paint company, and all these guys, we'd bring 30, 40 people show up at the house. A lot of young people do paintball, barbecue, and And a lot of inmates that got out would come. And I knew that my daughter was too slick and too smart. She's going to know. I never told her I was in prison. And I told Chloe, I said, I think it's, we're going to go tomorrow. We're going to drive 2 hours, be on the list together. And so I sat Quincy down. I said, hey, Quincy, I want to talk to you about your dad. And she's like big blue eyes. She's small, which I don't know where she got that from, but she's small. And I knelt down and I said, I need to tell you something about your daddy. And she said, what's that? And I said, when I was in my 20s, I had committed some crimes and I spent 7 years in prison. And she just started bawling. My first thought was, too soon? But she was bawling. And I thought I'd ruined the image. And I said, what's going on, sweetie? And this is what she said. And this is who she is. She said, oh, Daddy, you must have been so lonely. And then she walked up and gave me the hug, a daughter hug, and said, is that why you go into prison and help all these guys? And I said, yes, sweetie. And I haven't been alone in a long time. And I especially haven't been alone since you came into my life. And, when I told my son, you know what he said? Cool, Dad, let's go play catch. I mean, that's just the way. And I'm going to tell, I love amends stories because I think amends have power. I think the step that's forgotten is the ninth step, is the people start doing them and they never complete them. And I think there's a lot of healing, and I've made every one of my amends, and it took me a long time. And the one amends I didn't even have, would never thought, was my brother Chucky. Now, I would have never seen this because he was 7, I was 5. What possibly would I owe my brother an amend? And what it was people would say, if I'd go to an Al-Anon, sometimes I'm the token A speaker at Al-Anon conferences because they love me. I bring such hope, and I'm tiny, and all the mothers love me, And so they say, I'm sorry your brother died. And I would say this, yeah, it's okay. I didn't really know him. And then I came out of meditation that week and I realized that's really disrespectful. And I needed to go to California. Lodi, he's buried in Lodi. We were living in Maine. I asked Chloe, want to go to Lodi, California and put flowers on my brother's grave? And I need to make amends. And she said, of course. And we flew across and we went into this cemetery, super big, and I walked up into the office and I said, hey, my brother was buried here back in 1967. And she asked his name and I gave it to her, and she started writing on this map, and then she circled this and she gave it to me and she said, your brother's buried in Lullaby Land. And my knees buckled because I knew what that meant, that they had a special section for children. And I walked out, and it was like 2 months, 5 months, 1 year, 3 years, 8 years. No, it was just like all these children. And I sat in front of my brother's grave and I told him, I said, Chucky, I know we didn't know each other very well. And I know that when I was little, you were there and you helped me. And I'm truly, truly sorry that you didn't get to experience the life I got to experience, the first kiss, the driving a car, all the things. And I'd taken my life for granted and I ran it into the ground. And it's my goal and my duty to live my life in a way that you will look down and say, that's my little brother, and I'm really proud of him. And I had a deep understanding of how painful it was and why my mom drank the way she drank after he died. And I understood why they weren't there for me, because they couldn't be there for me. And on my daughter's 7th birthday, it would drive it into me. I cannot believe having to bury that little girl, and my son's the same way. And yet I judged my mom for not being there for me, or for drinking and being an alcoholic. And I am truly blessed. Okay. And I believe we are all blessed. And if you got anything out of this, just know this. I love Alcoholics Anonymous, and I love every piece of it. I love the group conscience when you argue about where to put the coffee pot. I love all that. I love, I was such a jerk that when I go to meetings in these Alano clubs when I was new and I was kind of feral and, not gone through the steps, and principled man, which is all suspect. So there's guys who'd have their seat, the old timers, that's their seat. I would sit in their seat. I'd get there early, sit in their seat, and dare them to tell me to get out. Like I'm 6'4", right? They never did, but they started getting there earlier. So I'm going to read this. And I think this is, I never cried until I was 30. From 10 to 30, my brother molested me. He got me doing crimes. He died 2 years ago of COVID. He was living on oxygen, drinking, smoking. He was not, I don't have enough time to tell you how I was able to make amends for the stuff I stole from him, but it's a powerful story. And then my older brother, my older brother's Dwayne, and this brother's a great guy, not alcoholic. And my brother's funeral, everybody's dead but me and Dwayne. And Dwayne looks at me and says, "Looks like it's just you and me, brother." And then 5 months later, he gets diagnosed with stage 4 glioblastoma brain cancer. And life's not fair. And there's no such thing as life on life's terms. Life has no terms. I determine what the term is. I determine what I accept or what I don't accept. That's on me. Life just rolls the way it rolls. I set the terms on what's acceptable. What I resist pains me. I started doing a study on compassion because I believe this is what we are. There's a guy named Father Henry Nouwen. I probably butchered his name. If there's ministers in here, correct me later. But he was like Notre Dame divinity, big name. And he wrote this thing on compassion that has touched me. And he says, the root of passion is to suffer. But the root of compassion means to suffer with. And he says, compassion asks us to go where it hurts, to enter places of pain, to share in brokenness, fear, confusion, and anguish. Compassion means going directly to those people and places where suffering is most acute and building a home there. Compassion means full immersion in the condition of being human. There's deep conviction that through compassion, our humanity grows into its fullness. And we build homes in the places that people don't want to, and we show compassion and love to people that don't want to. And that is the God flowing through us. And it's flowed through from you to me and me to others. And I am forever grateful. I love you dearly. And I gratefully thank you for asking me to speak at this event. Thank you.
So Brian took me on an emotional roller coaster with that particular talk. I was laughing. I was crying. I was all over the place, and I'm sure he did you as well. If you have any comments for Brian, you want to reach out to me, I'll get them over to him. If you have any comments about Brian or any of the other guests that we have on the podcast, the pod, feel free to reach out to me at John, John, at soberspeak.com. And I would love to hear from you. Or if you just want to write in and say, "Hey, John, how are you?" Or whatever the case may be, feel free to reach out once again, John at soberspeak.com. Now, remember, we don't want you sharing your gossip, but we would love it if you shared that episode or the entire podcast with a friend or family member. Pause your device, hit that share button. It may be just what they need today. Now, on to a little bit of a listener feedback. I wonder if I should start doing that more often. It's a little annoying, though, just slightly. Nonetheless, Dan writes in, and Dan says, "Hi, John. I'm not tech savvy, but I want in." That was the subject line of his email. He says, I've been listening to the pod for a year. I started at episode number one. I'm now through 175. Good for you, Dan. Thanks for the quality of the speakers. Your program is inspiring. I want what they have. Can you get me into the group, please? Thanks, Dan H. Sent from my iPhone. So I guess I just broke his anonymity. If you know a Dan H. with an iPhone, that may be him. But nonetheless, so Dan, when he says, I want in, what he's saying is, I want in to the super secret Facebook group. What it is, I sent him an email back with directions on how to do it. But if you are out there and you're listening and you say, well, wonder how moi gets into that super secret Facebook group, all you do is you go to Facebook and you search for Sober Speak Secret Group, and then there's a little button or something like that. I don't know, everybody figures it out. It says like let me in please, or can I get in, or ask for admission, or whatever the case may be, and you click that little button and we'll get you on in there. So that's how you would do it. But Dan, we're so glad to have you in. Brad writes in, and Brad says, hi, John, I found your podcast in jail, and I must say it was more than a blessing to me and my slow recovery. I'm getting out now, and staying clean is harder than what I was imagining it would be while lying in there taking all of those, quote, Van Taz Dick, VANTAZDIK, unquote, episodes with a Z on the end. Taking all those fantastic episodes in. Laugh out loud. I love you, John M. And the show wouldn't be what it was if someone else were trying to host it. Oh, that's very kind, Brad. Anyway, thank you for what you do. May God continue to bless you and all your guests. Love, Brad R. Well, love back at you, and may God continue to bless you as well, Mr. Brad. Keep us posted here, all right? Annie writes in, is this the same lady who's Annie Get Your Gun? Or probably not, right? Probably it is somebody else. Anyway, she says, hi, John. I live in Michigan. I have been sober since January 5th of 2014. I actually don't have a sponsor. I talked to my mom, who is also in recovery. Now, that's kind of interesting, Annie. I don't think you say it in here. No, I'm looking at it. So when somebody uses the word mom, usually they are from across the pond. I see you live in Michigan. My guess is that you moved from England to Michigan, but who knows? Anyway, she says, I haven't finished a full episode yet as I listen on my way to work. I am really looking forward to episodes number 220 and 177, as mentioned in the one I'm listening to now. Oh, I know what she's doing. She's listening to the episode, and I mention Amy and Rachel on episodes number 220 and 177, and I can't remember which episode she was listening to, but I'm pretty sure she was referring to Amy and Rachel. Nonetheless, she says, I absolutely love listening to Mark Houston and Chuck C. from A New Pair of Glasses. I discovered Sober Speak on Facebook. Annie F. Wow. Well, that's interesting. We don't usually have people discover it on Facebook, but I'm sure glad you did. And Annie, you will be glad to know, by the way, I responded to her, said, please give my best to your mom. If your mom is listening right now, hello, mom. But Annie, you will be glad to know that I will be releasing an episode of Mark Houston talking live. And I also plan, I don't think I've got it queued up quite yet, but Chuck C., New Pair of Glasses, I want to get him in there as well. Like I've said before, I had no idea when I started this that I would be releasing kind of old time classics, if you will. But it turns out like a lot of the people that are new listening to this podcast have not been exposed to people like Chuck Chamberlain and Mark Houston before, and Clancy and all those folks. And so I'm glad that I'm able to release them as episodes. But thank you, Annie F. with the big smiley face. I appreciate it. Hi. Oh, Susie writes in. And Susie says, I wonder if her last name starts with a Q, Susie Q. But nonetheless, Susie writes in, she says, "Hi, John. I am super grateful to find this group, and I would love to join the Facebook group." Well, welcome on in, Susie. We're glad to have you. She says, "I am 2 weeks sober today after 35 years of alcoholic drinking." Wow, 2 weeks. God bless you, Susie. She says, "I live in Auckland." I hope I pronounced that right. New Zealand, Auckland, Auckland, New Zealand. Oh, she's a Kiwi. "And have been attending as many meetings as possible face to face, but am loving the online meetings, as I am restricted on time right now because I'm working full time and I have 4 children, 2 biological boys and 2 step boys. In saying that, I am so happy I have not lost my children or my job because it has been close at times. I found Sober Speak when I searched Alcoholics Anonymous on Spotify 2 weeks ago. I have loved all the speakers on your podcast and can't wait to try and find the meetings some of them attend. Oh, okay, that'd be cool." She goes, "I also love your sense of humor and the way you present the show with such an authentic energy." Well, thank you, Susie. She says, "For now, for me, it's 1 minute at a time." I get it. "And one thing right after another. It's working so far with the support of some incredible people within our AA community. Best wishes, Susie, a recovering alcoholic." Smiley face. Well, Susie, from this recovering alcoholic as well, John M., I appreciate you writing in and listening all over there where so now I'm assuming, so I've talked about this before. I've heard it's a myth, but for those of you who don't know, New Zealand is right next to Australia. But I've heard that in Australia, and I'm assuming it's the same in New Zealand as well, that when you flush the toilet or when you run the sink or whatever, the water goes down the opposite direction because it's on the other way to the equator. That could be a myth. I don't know. I need to make it down to Australia. In fact, my son, I swear, last night said, "Dad, do you know where I want to go?" Just out of the blue. I said, "Where?" He goes, "Australia." I said, "Really? Okay, well, maybe we can make that happen soon." I wish he would have said Austin, which is like Austin, Texas, which is like driving down the street, because it'd be much easier, much less expensive, and I don't know, just much less time in an airplane. But he went with Australia, and so I don't know. Hopefully, we'll try to make that happen here soon. Anyway, thanks for writing in, Susie. I appreciate it. Danny writes in. He says, "Hi, John. I'm an alcoholic from Baltimore, Maryland. I failed a breathalyzer test that my federal PO gave me, so he sent me to Avery Road Treatment Center. I completed my detox, and now I'm in long-term inpatient program called, I won't say the name of the program, but it's in Baltimore." He says, "I am married 1 year and 4 months, and I used to smoke crack. My wife and I smoked crack, and she also sniffed fentanyl, but it progressed to her shooting up with a needle. She is now living with her son and going through withdrawals on her own. She wants our marriage as much as I do. I'm on a 30-day blackout, which is over in the end of September." I'm not sure exactly what that means. "I've reached that point where I'm at 52 years old. I know I can't go back to that lifestyle of drinking or using. I've lost so much. But this reprieve is giving me a new perspective, and as long as I keep my end days of drinking," I think he means keep remembering that, "and using my front using up my front perspective won't change. I know I will need much help to learn how to live and enjoy life without drinking or using. So I'm reaching out and I'm getting as much help as I can get. Well, Danny, as you know, I responded to you and I said, hey, brother, just make sure that you get plugged in locally there with some sort of group or some people there locally in the Baltimore area. There are tons of folks that are available to help. And you know what's interesting about Danny? Danny actually sent in a couple of photos of himself. I'm not used to seeing the photos, but you're a very handsome man, Mr. Danny, and I appreciate you sending in those photos. Thank you very much. And best of luck to you, my friend. Keep us posted. Diane writes in, and Diane says, hello, John M. Well, hello, Diane. I just want to say I love your podcast with about 3 or 4 exclamation points. She says, I am 6 months clean and sober thanks to a 12-step program and enjoying life. I stumbled upon your podcast when looking for a good podcast on sobriety. I try to listen to one per day, starting with the oldest. Thank you so much for what you're doing. I share these podcasts with everyone in recovery. Sincerely, Diane S. Well, thank you for sharing them, Diane. I appreciate it. Congratulations on your 6 months. It's fantastic. Jeanette post. Oh, this was in the secret Facebook group. Post in the Facebook group. She says, John. She was in there. She's a Janai. Oh, I'm sorry. John, I found your podcast last year and began listening while driving from Corpus Christi to Austin to visit my sister. I listened to you while delivering favors. Oh, I'm not going to tell you where my mind went. Oh, okay. Wait a sec. This is, okay, I got to think about what she's actually saying here. I'm so sorry, Jeanette. This is just me. Anyway, she says, I listened to you while delivering favor, and it's with a capital F. I am going to guess that favor is some sort of consumable good of some sort, and not what I'm thinking. But nonetheless, I'm glad you're listening to us while you're delivering favor, Jeanette. Anyway, she says, I cannot express the gratitude I have for you in this community. Well, that may disappear after you hear me reading your email or your post on the what is this on the podcast. She says, anyway, it is infinite. Thank you so much, Jeanette. She says, I cannot believe I got to listen to the person who found a Group 13 in Dallas. I think she's talking about Don J on that one, but I'm not even sure. I've recorded a few of these things, right? And my memory is not fantastic. But anyway, wanting his sobriety so much, he sat outside. I have wanting his sobriety so much because he sat outside. I have a male sponsor. When I asked Elvis P., hey, what's the deal with men sponsoring men and women? He said, if I'm going to help you fix your messed up inside, what do I care about what you look like on the outside? July 5th, I celebrated 10 years. Yeehaw, Miss Jeanette. And then she says, he helped me. I'm sure he's talking about Elvis here. He helped me find God and create a foundation upon which my life sits. I am going to find the meetings you and your speakers mentioned. Yeah, it's a lot of different meetings. Well, I hope you can find them. One day I will show up and have a cup of coffee at your home group. Laugh out loud. She says, I'm not a stalker. Smiley face. Come on down, Miss Jeanette. She says, I cannot thank you enough for your service and the service of those who you have had on your show. Hope we can meet as we trudge this road of happy destiny. I pray we all continue to grow in the sunlight of the Spirit. Thank you, Jeanette. We've had a lot of people show up, both at the Frisco group. So I personally attend a couple of different meetings. One of them is the Frisco, is called the Frisco group. It's in Frisco, Texas. And then the other one is the Frisco Fourth Dimension, which is another group. And Frisco Fourth Dimension is on Saturdays at noon in Frisco. You can find it just by searching for it, I'm sure, on the interweb. And we have a lot, not only am I able to attend those meetings, but we have a lot of people that you have heard on the podcast in the past that come there, because a lot of times I do get people from out of town, right? But a lot of times I just grab somebody from the meeting and say, come on over, let's record an episode. And they're gracious enough to do so, and we get them posted. So, all right, everybody, that is uno más semana of the Sober Speak podcast. I take this 1 week at a time. I hope to be back next week. God bless you. Keep coming back. It works if you work it. And what's the other thing I try to say? May God bless you and keep you until then. Adios. Love you guys.